Welcome to Verse Breakdown. My name is Ewaenruwa Nomaren, and in this video, I want to talk about the verse Philippians chapter 2, verse 12, where St. Paul told the inhabitants of Philippi, "Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling." The first 3 quarters of the verse was where St. Paul was telling the people of Philippi that I've noticed that you guys are not like many people who are hypocrites and they're interested in just eye service and lip service. No, you guys do the real deal. You act as real Christians. St. Paul had told the Colossians that eye service is not good. Servants are supposed to be giving true service to their masters, and Christians are supposed to be giving true service to Jesus Christ, not the leaven of the Pharisees, if you read Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. But I'm really going to be focusing on what it means to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. To start off with, to work out your own salvation has to do with you generally living a righteous life. Righteousness delivers you in a sense, as we'll see in the examples that I will give, but generally, working out your own salvation has to do with you living a righteous life, doing what God wants you to do, and enduring persecution. Persecution is inevitable as a Christian, if we read 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12. It is a process that every Christian has to go through, and because of that, when we want to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling, it's about us living that righteous life, being unique, because being a Christian is being on a narrow road. If you read Matthew chapter 7 in verses 13 and 14, and Jesus Christ spoke about this in Luke chapter 13 verse 24, where he said, "Strive to enter in at the strait gate. For many, I say unto you, will seek to enter in and shall not be able." So it's about striving, it's about being unique, it's about living that kind of life. And the fear and trembling part of it just has to do with you fearing God, if we read Proverbs chapter 8 verse 13 and chapter 16 verse 6, and not deviating from that purpose. Because you fear God, as in like you respect God's principles, and you want to stick with that. When sin is coming in, you cast it away, you avoid it. If you read Proverbs chapter 4 in verses 14 and 15, and you guard your heart so that righteousness prevails in it. If you read Proverbs chapter 4 verse 23, guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life, as that Proverbs chapter 4 verse 23 reads. And of course, there are examples in the Bible of people who had worked out their own salvation with fear and trembling. And the 3 examples I want to talk about are Daniel, Job, and Noah. And these 3 were mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 14 in verses 13 and 14 and verses 16 and 18. If you look at these 3 men, they all endured persecution, as in like they were sort of being unique. They didn't do what most people did. Noah spent 120 years of his life building a boat, some massive boat, and everybody must have been like, "What the hell are you doing?" I mean, why would you be building such a big boat if you've never had rain to carry it or anything? Daniel was persecuted, especially when he was thrown into a lion's den in Daniel chapter 6. And there were a lot of stuff that happened to him. And obviously Job went through a lot of pain and sufferings from Job chapter 1, really to chapter 3, and then also in chapter 42, where it talks about how he was restored. They worked out their own salvation with fear and trembling, because though they went through all that persecution and suffering and pain and isolation, as in like they didn't do what everyone else did, so they were hated and so on, they stuck with the faith, and of course, they delivered themselves from the consequences of sin. And in our time, the last days, spirituality is knowing decline that it has never known before. People don't care about spirituality anymore. It's secularity that is being celebrated. It is secularity that makes all the money that everybody is caring about, that people are celebrating, etc. If you read Amos chapter 8 verse 11, which we have a whole separate verse breakdown on. However, for us to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling, we have to study the Bible. If you read 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 15. Watch and pray. If you read Matthew chapter 26 verse 41, and Luke chapter 21 from verses 34 to 36. We have to stick with the faith and not be moved by what the world is doing and how fantastic it might look. Everybody's fleeing to that or flocking to that if we read Revelation chapter 13 from verses 1 to 4, but we have to remain where we are and endure unto the end. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Matthew chapter 24 and verses 12 and 13. And that is where I'm going to stop on discussing the verse Philippians chapter 2 verse 12, which once again reads, Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. God bless you.